Hey writers, welcome to Ad Day. This is another way for you to revise the sentences in your essays to make them way better, and we are going to be surprise adding things. So I'm going to show you and unpack some different ways that you can add additional things to your writing to make the ideas that you're getting across much more clear. So ad day comes from a specific student issue where you are listing facts, quotes, and ideas, but you don't indicate the relationship between those ideas. You are just typing everything up, all your source material, listing it one right after the other, and you don't take the time to kind of explain how you are connecting those dots. And that's bad because your reader doesn't know how you're connecting those dots unless you tell them. So we're going to look at how you address that issue and different ways that you can make that not a problem. So on ad day, what you're doing is you are adding connectors to your writing. So you are going to look at these 4 different ways that you can show relationships among and between the words that you put down in your downdraft. And the 4 connectors we're going to look at are prepositions, conjunctions, relative pronouns, and punctuation. And those can sound kind of grammary and intimidating, but we're going to break them down and you'll see that a lot of them actually happen a lot more naturally than it sounds like they do. So before I show you how to add connectors, I want to show you what it looks like when you don't have any connectors at all. So you end up with paragraphs like this. There was only juice. The fridge holds the juice. Our fridge is what only had juice. I wanted something to put on cereal. I did have ketchup. I did have mayonnaise. I did not have pickle juice, or I did have pickle juice. I did not want those on Tostios. I don't think you would want those on Tostios. My little sister did not want those on Tostios. My sister has eaten some pretty weird things. She's eaten mushrooms and chocolate. You don't want to write like that, right? Like it's just listing things one right after the other. The ideas are all grammatically correct, but when you just list the stuff that you're trying to make points about, it doesn't sound good. When you don't have those connector pieces, your writing is just not going to sound very sophisticated or very enjoyable to read. So that excerpt we looked at actually comes from something written by Neil Gaiman. So the red part on this slide is what we already read. And then this blue part is once you add connectors, you can see how much better it gets. So when you add the connectors, you get there was only juice in the fridge, nothing else that you could put on cereal, unless you think that ketchup or mayonnaise or pickle juice would be nice on your Tostios, which I do not. Neither did my little sister, although she's eaten some pretty weird things in her day, like mushrooms and chocolate. So you have the same ideas, they're just not listed one right after the other with no connectors. You start adding those connectors and everything gets more interesting. It's way more engaging. It's just going to be all around better once you figure out how to add those in. So zooming in a little more on those upgrades after you added the connectors, everything in red is a connector. Those are all words that Neil Gaiman put into those sentences to show you how those words should be interpreted next to each other. So you've got the in, that, unless, on, or, which, although. Those are all words that connect ideas together and tell you how you should be understanding things. The blue, you can see all the commas in there. Periods are like stop signs, right? They tell you this idea stops here, and that's how you should interpret what you're reading. When you have commas, you're saying, I'm connecting these things. These ideas are still continuing, and there's not a pause yet. So now that you've seen the upgrades that happen once you add those connectors in, we're going to unpack those 4 different kinds. The first kind is prepositions. Those are going to be words that show time, direction, or location. You can use them to introduce examples, like for example, it's a pretty standard one. You can show contrasts and comparisons. They do all kinds of really cool stuff, and they come pretty naturally when you are writing. So a lot of times English teachers will say prepositions are anything a squirrel can do to a tree, like up the tree, down the tree, in the tree, around the tree, on the tree, those kinds of words. But when you're trying to add, I would just focus on time, direction, and location and examples in your writing. Prepositions are going to be the words that you want to use to do that. Conjunctions are the next kind of connectors, and they're going to connect words, phrases, and clauses for you. So they define the relationships between and among phrases and clauses. So when you're thinking about our sentence patterns, conjunctions are going to be really helpful for you to understand what's going on there. And the slide looks pretty intimidating, but once we unpack it, you'll see it's not. There's 2 kinds of conjunctions, subordinating and coordinating. Your coordinating conjunctions are your fanboys. So that's what happens in your compound sentence. You're saying the law passed, some people didn't follow it. Cool. 2 sentences, you've listed ideas, but when you add that connector, the law passed, comma, but some people didn't follow it, now the reader can see how you want them to interpret those 2 ideas and why you're presenting them. Subordinating conjunctions, those are your AWUBIS words. So those are going to show you relationships, comparisons, results, concessions, and usually they're going to make one idea more important than the other. So if you had the idea, the law passed, people's lives changed, and you wanted to show how you're connecting those, you could say, when the law passed, comma, people's lives changed. So just adding those kinds of words into the list of facts or ideas that you have really, really helps make things clearer and sound better. Relative pronouns are the third kind of connector. They're really easy to add in. If you have additional information that didn't quite make it into your downdraft, this is a great way to add that information. So if you are adding additional information to ideas or things, you can use the words that, what, or which. So if you had a sentence like, I like movies, cool. If you say, I like movies that have happy endings, now you've got a lot more information and you can see how those ideas are connected. If you're adding information or details to people, you use who, whoever, whose, or whom. But those are relative pronouns you can add into your writing to add additional details to things. And the last kind of connector is just punctuation. And so you can look at the kind of punctuation you have and see if you need to add anything there. If you're combining things, you can use commas, dashes, or semicolons. If you're introducing something, dashes are really good, colons are really good. If you're enclosing information, you can use commas again, like an interrupter sentence, kind of encloses that extra information. You can use two dashes, parentheses. It's a really literal way to enclose information. And then quotation marks are going to literally enclose someone else's words. So you're just making sure you have added all that connector punctuation that you needed. So when you go to do this for your own writing, I want you to see what that looks like. You have to identify what connectors you want to use, and you have to find some precision in how your ideas are coming together. So you want to pick out a paragraph maybe where you have done something where you've just kind of listed ideas and you're not really sure how to turn them into better sentences. The example we're going to use here is from a Year in American History paper again. So if you had these facts that you're trying to list, America declared independence from England. They did this in 1776. They did this to gain more freedom. What ideas are you working with there? You've got to identify, okay, so you've got a date, you've got a country, you've got what they did, and you have why they did it. So if you want to show the relationship between those ideas and not write in that very elementary school level, kind of just simple sentences one right after the other, you can end up with something like, to gain more freedom, comma, America declared independence from England in 1776. So you've used prepositions there, you've used some connector punctuation, and you've used just different ways to show that those ideas that you've listed out come together in a specific way. And we'll go through this one more time. Let's get a little more real. Usually in your paragraphs, you're going to have several different kinds of sentences that all are giving good ideas, but just not presenting them well. So if you had this list of facts or ideas, the year 1980 was a time of unrest for politics. People referred to the 1980s as the Reagan era. Ronald Reagan was sworn in as the 40th president. Reagan served 2 terms as president. Reagan was not happy with the communists. He believed the communists were putting others in danger. Those are all ideas that you found from your research and that you want to convey in your paper. How do you connect them and make them better sentences? So let's see how that all came together for this student. They said the year 1980 was a time of unrest for politics. So we've got some prepositions in there. Ronald Reagan was sworn in as the 40th president and served 2 terms. So we got that little fanboys coordinating conjunction in there. And then there's comma, which caused people to refer to the 1980s as the Reagan era. So there's that word which. You're adding additional information to show that you are just connecting that to the same terms that you're talking about here. And then because Reagan believed the communists were putting others in danger, he strove to eliminate the threat that they posed. So you've had that list that we just looked at, right? Like all those different Reagan facts. And then if you put them together with your connectors, your writing sounds so much more sophisticated. And when you break it down into those 4 connector pieces and just kind of use that as a checklist, have I used prepositions? Have I used relative pronouns? You can add that variety and that good sounding stuff to your writing.